Hi, welcome to a new video, and it's camera review time again. And today from the collection we have a film camera, and it is the Minox 35EL. So this is part of the Minox 35 series. The EL wasn't the top of the range, but it's a perfectly good little camera, and I want to basically spend a little bit of time talking about the camera, the pros and the cons of it, because this is part of my quest to find an everyday carry camera that shoots film. I already have an everyday carry camera digital wise. It's a Canon G15, and I'll link to a video about that just up there. Whereas I'm looking for an everyday carry 35mm camera, something small and light that I can use. So the Canon Dial 35-2 is one of the ones in consideration, and I've already done a review of that, so take a look at that if you want to as well. We're looking at this today, and I've got a whole load of other cameras that I will be using, reviewing and looking at in my quest to find something for everyday use. And once I've finally made up my mind, I'll let you know which one it is and why. But let's start by looking at the camera itself. The Minox 35EL, made in Germany, so that will be West Germany because it was made from 1974, so before reunification. It is a 35mm full frame camera, so it's not half frame like the Canon Dial. Has a lovely little lens on it, a colour Minox 35mm f2.8 lens. It's an aperture priority camera and zone focus, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. It has adjustable ASA between 25 and 800, and that's controlled by a little dial on the back there. You've got a metal tripod mount for it, flash hot shoe because it doesn't have a built-in flash. The shutter is the little red button just there. Go on, please focus on that, thank you. And is threaded for a cable release, and you've got the film wind on the back just there. It does need batteries to run. Now, the original battery for this they don't make anymore, so you can off of eBay get little adapters for them, or you can do what I did, which is take 4 LR44 batteries, wrap them in some electrical tape, make sure the ends are nice and clean, and that pops in the battery compartment and works perfectly well. The metering's fine off of the back of it. Now, loading the film is a little bit unusual in comparison to a lot of 35mm cameras, so some of you may not have come across this before, but there's a little switch on the base that you flick over as I've done, showing red, and that then actually removes the entire back from the camera. So the back separates, and the 35mm canister goes in there, goes across and hooks up under there. You then fire shots off, wind it on, and slip the back on. So it's not the quickest or easiest thing to load film up into, but it does work well enough. But because of its size and that mechanism, I will come on to one of the cons behind it. Now, you'll notice that to use it, you have to fold the lens down, and that pops it out, and that also switches it on. In the viewfinder you do get a readout of what the shutter speed is going to be for your chosen aperture, and if I just move in closely so that you can see the lens there, and yep, that's focused. So basically you've got two controls down the bottom, on the lens. This one just here sets your aperture, and then this allows you to set your focal distance. Now, it's not a rangefinder, so you're either guesstimating, or what I tend to do is set it as a hyperfocal. So for example, if I set this to f8 and then set infinity to where the f8 mark is, I will show you this in a second, you'll see that I now know that everything between... Go on, get into focus. There we go. Everything between the two f8 marks, which are between the 5.6 and the 11. So everything from infinity down to around about 10 feet would be in focus at that. So I could then just fire, oops, sorry, it's winding on, fire the shutter, and they'll all be in focus. So that's how I tend to use this, is with hyperfocal focusing, and it works quite well. You do need a reasonable aperture to get away with that, but once you get used to it, it's actually a fairly straightforward process and reasonably accurate. You may have noticed there that if I fire the shutter, you do need 2 motions on the winder to wind on. The winder, although it is serrated, does have a little lever on there to make it a little bit easier to wind it on and to save your thumb from getting all calloused up. Okay, so that's the camera itself. Right, looking at the pros behind this, the size, it is an obvious one. It is absolutely tiny. It is one of the smallest 35mm cameras ever made, full frame or half frame. It is one of the smallest. I don't think it's quite the smallest. I think the very expensive Minolta, whose name eludes me at the moment, took that crown, and the little Rollies are a similar-ish size, but they're all in the same ballpark, being absolutely tiny. So this is something you can put into a pocket quite comfortably. It's very small in that regard, so it's incredibly convenient for an everyday carry camera. So that's the first of the pros. The second pro is the lens. The lens on it is really, really nice and sharp. Now, all the shots you've been seeing on this and will see are from a roll of Kentmere Pan 400. So it's a 400 ASA film. It's the old Kentmere Pan. So it is quite a grainy film, but the results out of this are extremely nice. And it's got good edge-to-edge sharpness off the back of it, so really nice little lens on this. So that is a big, big plus point in regard to this particular camera. Those are its main selling points: its size and the fact that it's got this incredibly sharp lens on it. Now, it is aperture priority, but you can use, as I say, is that the right way up? Yes, it is. You can use the film speed reading to give you some basic exposure compensation if you're shooting a 400 ASA, 200 ASA or 100 ASA film. Obviously, if you're cramped up to the max or the minimum, 25 or 800, it limits what you can do. But, you know, you do have a little bit of tweakability, shall we say, with this. So it is nice in that regard. Okay, on to the cons behind this camera. So the first one is, and it doesn't really bother me, but I know it can be a factor for a lot of people, and that's the zone focus. And the fact that you've got manual focus in a viewfinder camera with, you're either guessing the distance or you're having to use zone focus, and I know some people aren't comfortable with that. It doesn't bother me. I can get reasonably accurate shots out of it, certainly enough to be able to use it. I tend to whack a slightly higher speed film in there so that I've got more flexibility around the actual aperture I'm using, and the aperture does stop down to f16 on these, so if you are putting faster speed film in there and it's sunny, you've still got that flexibility. And you can always use the exposure compensation, as I say, on there as well. So that's a minor con for me. Much more important cons are, well, this one's actually tied to its tiny size. As you can imagine, That is quite fiddly to use, being perfectly honest. This is not something you're going to be able to set quickly and use, you know, as you're trying to grab a shot. What's the focus? What's the aperture I'm using? And then get it up to take a picture. So it is quite fiddly to use, and I have nearly dropped it on a few occasions. Now, one of the shots in here you'll see has got some in-camera movement, and that was where I actually genuinely did nearly drop the camera and hit the shutter as I was catching it. As it turns out, came out as quite a nice shot. I quite liked it, but it is an easy camera to drop, and you will notice there are no strap lugs on here. So you got nothing that you can put a wrist strap or anything like that on there. They do a case, the half case that you can go on there, but it tends to bulk it out a bit, which kind of defeats the point of the camera. So that is a bit of a negative. And speaking of negatives, my final con on this is, realistically, although it will take a 36 exposure roll of film, once you get much past about 26, 27 shots, the wind on becomes quite difficult, and you can feel it being forced a little bit. And if I just pop the bottom off, you've actually only got one set of sprocket catches in the gears just there. You don't have two, only one. And as you get past about 26, 27, what can happen, because I used to own one of these years ago and I have had it happen to me, is as you start getting it really tightly wound into the take-up spool, it can start tearing the sprockets and even stretching the film to a degree. So realistically, you do need to limit this thing to 24 exposure shots, and that for me is the biggest con behind this, is the fact that you are pretty much limited to around about 24 rolls of film. Now, there are a few, like I think the Colour Projects Glow and things like that come at about 27 exposures. You'd probably be okay with those in here as well. But yeah, it is something that you do need to be aware of with these. They don't really like 36 exposure rolls of films. But overall, is it a good camera to use? Absolutely. I mean, despite all the cons I've just mentioned, the two pros, and yes, I'm aware there are only two, which are the absolutely tiny size of it and just how damn good that lens is, certainly do make it a very strong contender for what I'm looking at, you know, as an everyday carry camera. And really it's whether I can live with not being able to pop 36 exposure rolls of film in there and having to a large degree to specifically buy 24 exposure films to use in this. And that to me is its biggest negative. But there we go. That is the Minox 35 EL. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos get uploaded. Thanks very much for watching. Take care. Bye.